All right, people are coming in. Nice to see everybody. We're about to get started. I'm going to give it a couple moments to see who else pops in to talk about shadow work. If you follow my Instagram, you've probably noticed today that I've been really obsessed with the new cat that I have, and I'm pretty sure that she's going to um, uh, pop into the video because she's kind of been attached to me. She came from another home where they had decided that they were about to have another baby. And so 3 small children and a very high maintenance cat. It's a lot to deal with. So as a result, I'm very, very lucky to be the proud mommy of a Sphinx baby. Well, she's not a baby, but she's a baby to me. Oh no, I need to mute my phone. There we go. So there will be no interruptions. But yeah, the cat will probably interrupt too. And I'm glad you heard her, Ramona. She's awesome. All right. So tonight, I want to talk about shadow work and how we can use tarot to help us with our shadow work. Tarot is meant to give us insight and help us to connect with spirit. And the way we do that is by just allowing ourselves to be a conduit for the information as we would with any other reading. So let's start out by defining shadow work. That is a question that I get a lot. Shadow work, the definition of trauma is when we have damage to ourselves as a result of some overwhelming stress. And, people think of trauma as these very intense situations with a lot of explanation to it. Anything that's really intense to us can be trauma, no matter what, if you feel like it's something that would be not be traumatic for somebody else, but it's traumatic for you, that's there's no need to invalidate yourself and your experience. Anything that causes us trauma can create these patterns of behavior where we are trying to keep from feeling the pain or the suffering that we had, as trying to keep that from happening again as a result of the trauma. So shadow work itself is diving into those spaces, diving into the shadow spaces and finding our triggers, finding out how that we try to keep from having the suffering, how that we react and the reactions that we have and the patterns that we have created in our life so as to not feel that pain that we felt or that stress that we felt in the areas which initially created the trauma. Now, one thing I have noticed, typically in witch circles, we talk about trauma in and we talk about, shadow work and how that we do that during the dark times of the year when we're all inside and we're in study mode, we are introspective, we're not going out and being as social. But last year we all experienced COVID right around this time of the year. There was the pandemic that occurred and we were all put inside in, forced to be in spaces with ourselves, forced to not avoid some of the work that we had been doing before. And a lot of people found themselves deep in shadow work and introspection and really getting into those uncomfortable spaces. And as a result, that aspect and that need was amplified tremendously. And I know that it is human nature, flesh and blood creatures want to avoid discomfort. But the only way for us to truly grow is to get into spaces of discomfort, put ourselves in areas outside our comfort zone and allow ourselves to experience that space and work through it and grow as a result of it, right? So shadow work is taking parts of ourself that were in some way damaged, hurt, separated from us, and reintegrating that area and beginning to allow ourselves the healing space. Because what so often happens when we experience any kind of trauma is that, like I said, we build these patterns of behavior that keep us from moving forward and from acting as opposed to reacting. So we become these reactive individuals, and we are not actually living within true, authentic space of ourselves, and we're not making decisions that are in alignment with who we truly want to be and who we are at the core of our being. We are making decisions that are based on the past and keeping us from experiencing discomfort. So how do we go about recognizing these aspects of ourselves? How do we know what areas that we need to work on? And one of the first ways is, let's take a look at emotions. Let's take a look at how you feel within your being. We have a tendency as people to identify emotions as good or bad. We put them in little categories, and one category is, oh, it's good to feel happy. It's good to feel industrious. It's good to be excited about something. And then we put these other ones in a category of, it's bad to feel anger. It's bad to feel sadness. In reality, there are no good or bad emotions, not really. It's more so how we choose to use the emotions that are in, that we feel, how we choose to act based on that information. So, as such, emotions are indicators. They tell us, when something is either in balance or out of balance. And when things are out of balance, we will feel sadness. We will feel anger. Now, these emotions aren't bad. Anger itself can be a huge motivating factor. If something is in some way out of balance, or it is unhealthy, anger can help us to get away from that or to work toward change. It's how we put those emotions and that aspect and that information into play within our lives. So we are responsible for the choices we make. Now, we may, the feelings come up, they come quickly, we acknowledge them and choose how we are going to let that energy play out within our lives. Now, if you have an emotion that is typically deemed as negative, you can take that as a trigger. You can take that in, that situation, whatever it is, and take a look and notice that that is a trigger. Now, once you've identified your triggers, it's time to begin to be truly introspective, to be very aware and begin to dig deeper, because the trigger itself, the injustice, the unfair situation, whatever it is, whatever the wound is surrounding that, whatever it is that is bothering you based upon that trigger, you can look within and begin to travel backwards in, if we were to look at your life linearly, you can then identify where those spaces are within your past that need to be healed, that need to be addressed. And then you can begin to notice the patterns that you set up surrounding issues of that nature, or issues that you deemed to be of that nature. Because one of the things that we notice about trauma is that it shifts our perspective. So if somebody comes to you and speaks something in such a way that it reminds you of an area that is unhealed within you, then you can react with your trauma response, or react in such a way as if they are attacking you in the manner that you are used to being attacked, or that you expect to be attacked. So the triggers that are created within our world, maybe somebody has something that they want that they are so used to being attacked in a specific way that they expect it. So someone may come to you with a question, very innocently wanting your perspective in some area, and that is an area that you are used to being judged based upon. And so you react because you're immediately expecting there to be judgment in that space. And rather than seeing the question for what it is, you react in that pattern that you are used to reacting in. And as a result, it creates more of those feelings that are part of the trigger, and it creates more discomfort, and you are just reinforcing that pattern and that trauma because you have already placed it within that space. So Kit, I see that you are saying that the hardest part is recognizing the triggers, but then being honest. Yeah, honesty with ourselves, really looking deeply at what it is that the space that we're in and how we're acting and reacting and interacting with the world, that can be difficult. We so often want to see ourselves as the hero in every single story that we tell, and we're not. We are flawed creatures, and we have to accept. And one of the most beautiful things that I see in people is when they are truly honest and can say, I fucked up. I did something, or I looked at something in the wrong way. And that is the most beautiful strength I see, is when people admit being flawed. It's something we all know about ourselves. We all know it about everyone around us, but it is so hard to admit when we are wrong. That's, and when people do that, and when we are willing and open to accepting the areas in which you fall short of the mark, then you can begin to meet that mark. You can begin to do that healing. And there's so much more respect within that space of somebody admitting that they don't always do everything exactly correctly in the way that they want to be. Because ideally, we all want to react, or we all want to act in alignment with who we want to be and who we see ourselves to be, and the potential person that is really there, our authentic self. So we have to strip away the trauma, the pain, the flawed perspective, and begin to work on ourselves. I derailed myself. I have so much to say here. So when we look and we find those perspectives, and we can readjust our perspectives, and we begin to work through that hurt, the pain, the suffering that's there, anything that has caused us to create unhealthy patterns of behavior. When we do that, and we begin to shift our perspective, that is only a part of what is necessary for the healing space. We can change our mindset, change the way that we view things. The perspective is shifted, but you still have these patterns. So you are different, but then the universe is going to start throwing a bunch of situations in front of you for you to actually begin to practice. We have to practice. We have to realign ourselves. Wish some would have said to you, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying by that, Kit. But feel free to retype it in and let me know what you mean by that, because I'm not sure I'm following that comment very well. And I don't want to speak on something unless I'm 100% or 98% sure where you're going with it. So anyway, the patterns, breaking the patterns. One thing that I have seen in my own life and in that of my conversations with clients is that we identify what we want to change, and we really do change our mindset, and we see the world differently. But then you begin to try to act that out in the world, but we have created those patterns of behavior that were meant to keep us from feeling that pain or that suffering or creating a place of discomfort. And then we have to go ahead and break those habits. And how do we do that? Well, the universe will give you a lot of possibilities and situations for doing that. And what I mean by that is when you think you've conquered something, you're going to see those situations show up again and again and again. And that is our practice space. And yeah, you're going to fuck up. You're going to have that moment where you fall back in line with the familiar pattern that you're used to, the familiar behavior, the familiar mindset, and you're going to recognize it. All right. Ramona, I'm so thankful that this is, that you are hearing this and that it is touching you in a way. I was hoping that I was called by Spirit to speak about this week. So thank you. Thank you for your feedback. So when those situations, okay, Kit, you said someone say at one time, a way of healing the hurt from your past is to heal the hurt in someone else's. And what he meant to say was you're somewhere and you see somebody in pain and say to them what you would have them say to you. Oh, thank you, Kit. Actually, that is something that I wanted to bring up. So thank you for typing that in. Oh, and thank you, Flynn girl, for your, I'm not sure if I can see your face, if I know you, but Flynn girl, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. So Kitty did decide to pop in. But like I said, those patterns show up and we are given the opportunity to, first time, you're going to probably, I mean, at least for me, the first time I will note it and go, oh my God, I'm doing that thing I said I wasn't going to do. The thing that I know isn't the right behavior. I got to cut this. I got to fix this shit. And so then the second time I catch it and maybe I'm midway through the pattern of behavior that I'm trying to break, but it is that opportunity and that awareness that continues to grow. So each time it becomes easier to do exactly what I mean to do and to be present and authentic within that space. And thank you, Flynn girl. So the more that we practice and the more that we begin to develop new spaces of interacting, then we stop being those reactionary beings. It is, we always want to act, and there's a difference between reacting and acting. So let me explain that a little bit. Acting means that stimulus comes in, you take in the information, and then you act accordingly. You try to see it as clearly as possible, and then you act accordingly. Reacting is something comes at you and you bounce something back immediately. At least that's how I use those terms when I'm speaking about shadow work. And I do not desire to be a reactionary being. I prefer to be a person of action who chooses how I'm going to feel about something, how I'm going to put the energy and the information forward. And one of the areas that I have found the most work and the most growth, and this goes back to what Kit was saying earlier, saying the things that you wish someone had said to you, is that with my children, I find that I have had so many opportunities to say I'm sorry, to say I fucked up. I'm trying to show them that being real and honest and not trying to be the adult constantly, and showing that adults are flawed too. That everyone is, and we need, and trying to emulate what I wish had been modeled for me. I have had many opportunities to do that with my children. And trust me, my kids know how to call me out on some shit. Children do, And my cat. So when in order to use tarot as a way to dive deeper into our shadow work, one of the things that can be really difficult, especially when you're deep within the trauma, when you have experienced something that is painful for you, you have identified that you have a trigger, you know it's there, and you want to go deeper into what that is. Because with trauma, depending upon how you reacted to it, a lot of times trauma can create places where we lose memory, or we can't begin to pull forward, or it's too difficult to pull forward the memories of where the core of that began. And so one thing that can be done is to pull some cards on it, and you identify the trigger. You may know which card would be a good placeholder for that, and place that down, but you don't actually need a card for the trigger. You can shuffle your deck to find 2 or 3 cards that will help you to understand what the trigger is, what the core of that pain is that is causing behavior that perhaps is, it's causing suffering in your life, essentially. So you pull those cards, and that can help you get perspective on what it is. Is it an abandonment issue? Are you suffering because of, not feeling that you are good enough in some way? Is it perhaps fear of some sort? And what is the fear? The cards can help you to get perspective, because cards are a conduit for spirit to speak to us. And when we come honest and forward, and in your quiet space, maybe light a couple candles, take a bath, do some serious self-care, allow yourself to cry, and dive into this spirit work by pulling a couple cards and finding how that trigger came to be, what it is for you, and the cards will give you that perspective. So once you've identified that, then pull a couple of cards to figure out how that you can approach shifting that energy. One tool that I do really appreciate is, if you are comfortable and remember the trauma, remember what the core of that was and how it has been replayed in your life, going through each of those situations and rewriting them. Don't just replay it in your head and reframe it. Actually writing things down, you give weight to your words when you put pen to paper. And the more weight that your words have, the more that it goes into our being. Now, the ancient Egyptians, I follow a Kemetic spirituality, they believed that the act of writing something was creating magic. And so when we reframe things with handwritten word, we can begin to heal those spaces and be those words that we needed to hear, the parent we needed in that situation, the comfort, whatever it was that wasn't present for us, we can begin to reframe it, talk about it, and heal that. Now, just doing that isn't going to make the pain go away. We still have to sit with it. We have to be gentle with ourselves. We have to understand exactly where we're coming from, and the fact that pain takes a while. We have to actually be in it in order to allow ourselves to get through it. We can't build a bridge over it, because there's still going to be that dirty water underneath. We have to go through the water and clean it up, and begin to allow, pick up the trash within, on the banks, and begin to take some time to just take care of yourself and be really gentle with yourself when you're going through this. You're going to find that you're much more sensitive during that space. You may need to be away from other people. You may need your loved ones around. You can talk to, the people that matter the most, and let them know you're going through some shit. You're working on healing, and you need their support. Any of you that watch my videos or listen, I'm always available. I sleep odd hours, so you can always send me a message or a text via IG. And just anytime you need support, that's there. I strongly recommend therapy. There is nothing wrong with therapy. Therapy helps us to gain different perspective, especially when we find that our perspective is so skewed, and that it has been damaged and in some way by never having good behaviors or good relationships, or the models that we have in our life for relationships, and be they friendships or lovers or business spaces, the models that we have in our world for how to process our emotions, those those spaces are really hard to come by. There's so much dysfunction in our society that if you've never had that modeled for you, you should not be so hard on yourself as to believe that you should know how to process these spaces by yourself. So getting help from somebody else, or getting a perspective from somebody else who can, be present for you in that space, is priceless. So going through that area of healing, you shift your perspective, you shift your mindset, and then it's time to break the patterns. It's time to go through a cycle of shedding of your skin. The death card really comes into play here, because the death card is all about cycles. When we experience trauma and we have something that causes a shadow space, a negative realm for us, the way that I explain that is, if we are experiencing life authentically and fully and allowing ourselves to be open and free, then we are living life, in this circular pattern that resembles a spiral. So a lot of my tarot readings, I do a spiral layout. But when we get caught in these patterns that are not allowing us to go forward, we're just stuck revolving in a circle. And so the death card can come in. We can use that and meditate on the death card and use that as a space for us to break those patterns and shift the energy. And you can choose which card would identify the healing and meditate on that. Tarot, so often we use it to understand situations, but we can also use the energy of the cards as a means for drawing that within your life and drawing that into you. So I strongly do recommend using tarot in that capacity as well. So Angelica, you said that I will get to see you next weekend, and I'm looking forward to that very much. So anyway, that is basically what I had wanted to present to everyone, and the information that I had wanted to share. Once we have processed what we're going through, you have to be patient with yourself as you learn how to navigate the world as a different person, as a different aspect of yourself. There is a beautiful metaphor that I learned in one of my classes in college, and I believe it's Buddhist. I took a lot of religious courses in my college years because I had thought I wanted to do comparative religions. Really, I just wanted to study everything. And finally, they kicked me out. Well, they made me quit. Thank you, Ramona, for being present. But in this particular metaphor, it states that you can stand on a bridge. Again, we go back to a bridge, and look at the water. And you're seeing the same water. You're seeing the same creek pass beneath that bridge over and over and over again, but the water is always different. And when we heal ourselves and we clear that water is different. You are different. You are new. You are fresh. That is, you are a different being in many ways, in many aspects of you. One area where you will have to be patient, where patience will be tested after you have gone through some of your shadow work, attacked the aspects and torn down the walls of, you know, an area where you have done the healing. People that knew you or have known you for a long while, and they have become accustomed to your triggers, you have to give them the opportunity to experience you differently and to see that you have changed, because they, you know, you have a pattern. You had a pattern. That pattern is past, but now you have the opportunity to show them who you are presently. They're just not used to that. So they may approach you as if you are still that old person. So we have the opportunity to be patient and allow them to see the new aspect of us. And we can even have a conversation with them about that and say, hey, remember how I used to, you know, this was, I mean, not everyone do we want to share all of our deepest, most intimate truths with, but for those close to us, that that may be a necessary conversation so that that interaction can be more authentic and real. Does anyone have any questions? I'm seeing all of so many beautiful people that I know and love have showed up. And I really appreciate you all being here and being present and listening. I'm going to put this on IGTV once it is complete. I just want to give everybody a chance to ask any questions you might have before I close it out. Well, thank you all. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message, put a comment. If you have another topic idea for a future Tea and Tarot, I welcome those. Thank you all for being present.